Thank you for joining us for the Self-Love Summit. I'm your host, Saenz, and with me this week is Tambra Harck. Welcome, Tambra.
Thank you.
I am excited to have another soulful intuitive who knows how to embrace the feminine and the masculine. That's what I get from your work. And I'd like you to begin with your story, please, on how you got to the grace of where you are right now.
Don't you love this question? Well, I'm 53, so if we got like the breadth of the story, it'd take us 53 years. The way that I see, especially since we want to talk about self-love today, the way that I see the way I got to where I am relative to love is that in 1959, my mother was a teenager and pregnant with me. And in 1959, that was a very disgraceful thing. Except my mother didn't experience it that way. She experienced that she was carrying a child of love. The church didn't see it that way. Her church tried to get her to go live in a different town, somewhere else where nobody knew her, have the baby, and give it up for adoption. I won't even say me, because that was never going to be a possibility for my mother. She refused. She was 17. She refused. My grandparents welcomed me lovingly. All my family did. But the church continued to just disapprove of my existence. And I knew this. I knew I was a bastard child. I knew that there was a shame about me even being born. I knew there was great pain that was caused from my existence. Like, oh my God. I knew that young. And I knew it both intuitively and I knew the stories about it. At one point when I was still very, very young, pre-cognitive, like I wasn't speaking by any means, the church had a meeting. And my mother attended this meeting and they were going to discuss this very important topic about whether or not my mother could remain a member of their church because I existed. First of all, it was a Christian church. It's such an unchristian behavior if you ask my opinion about Jesus and Christ's points of view of the value of human beings. But my mother, who to this day is still not a public speaker, stood up in front of that congregation and said, "You are speaking as if you get to decide about my relationship between me and God. And my relationship between me and my God is just that, mine and his. And I have no doubt that God loves my child and would never ask me or she to leave." So I had this mix of messages, this mix of interpretations. And I knew that I was greatly loved by both my parents. My father later came into our lives and joined us. And my parents are still married 50 some odd years later. But I grew up knowing that I was both loved, provided for, supported, believed in. And I also knew that on some fundamental level, or at least I believed, that I was unlovable. And that perhaps I was unlovable by God, whatever God meant. Fast forward through a lot of years of ambition and drive and a 12-year marriage, and now I'm divorced, and I've been on a spiritual journey for like 20 years. I'm only 30 years old. And I am, in that question of how do I live with who I am? I'm so unhappy about life. And I have all this ambition and all this vision and all this drive for experiencing something way beyond what I've ever imagined, like what I've ever seen evidence is possible. And so I went up to Mendocino Coast in Northern California. It's a place that deeply speaks to my soul. And I went out to the Bluffs, which is this just magical place where the if you could picture it or even imagine yourself there, the forests of redwoods are thick and they come right up to right about where the highway is and a little further. And then there's these long pastures of land. And then these cliffs, we call them bluffs. over the ocean. And when you stand at the edge, not too near the edge, you're overlooking these magnificent craggy rocks at the base of the cliff here. And then I stood there, and I've been there many times before this moment, and I stood there looking at the ocean, which, for each of us has such deep, profound healing. It just holds that for humanity. And this particular time, I looked out to the very far reaches of the ocean, to where I couldn't see any further, but I knew it continued. And at that moment, I started to sense how there was this place, that line way out in the distance, where I could see the sky came down to meet the ocean. And there was this, kiss happening right out there at the horizon. And in that moment that I felt the kiss, I felt the ocean, the sky also was reaching all the way back to me and beyond me. So here I was, held in this kiss between heaven and earth. I didn't have the word love for it for many years later. But I could tell you now that that was a moment when I had the experience of the pure, essential energy of love.
That's beautiful.
And so you asked, what's my story about how I came about this? That moment became one that I became so curious about. And I nourished it. And I used to tell stories about it. I'd stand on the stage and I'd be giving presentations about presence and passion. And all I could do was call this presence. I didn't know what else to call it. But if you imagined that you stood, and I've invited people, hundreds of thousands of people, to stand with their arms outstretched and know that the earth and the oceans are below you, and the sky and the cosmos above you, and that you are the creation, that miracle between the kiss. And I began to know that as love. And I began to know that as this marriage between the masculine and feminine, and the marriage between our humanity, our vitality, our ordinariness and our miraculousness in these beautiful bodies of ours, and our divine expression that is beyond imagination.
That's beautiful. And you know what? I also got so deeply, perfectly beautiful, because I'm also a child of illegitimacy. You have to cut this.
Oh, I hope not.
You started as a beautiful kiss between your parents of love. And how symbolic your expression of discovering your self-love in that moment on the bluff, looking out, and you seeing heaven and earth just kissing and embodying you in its love. It never left you. It's just, it was the first time that you got to see it on a grander scale. And that's beautiful. So thank you. I love that story.
It's always funny to me, not funny, curious, do I really tell in 1959,
you tell it how it is, because
who are listening or watching this, and you don't really kind of comprehend, being a bastard child, so what? We don't even call it that anymore, because it's really quite rude.
It is. It's disgraceful to our being.
It really was, and the shame that gets birthed in us shuts us down from love, from loving and feeling love, and that became that mix of all those stories around what love is became my lessons and my teachers.
Right.
And
same here.
And that moment when my mother stood up in that church, and I've thought about that often, but I've often thought about it from the woundedness of, they didn't want me. Right. I was such a disgraceful thing to even exist. That a church, a congregation that is come together in celebration of the words of Jesus, a pretty magnificent being who's walked this planet, how could I not be wanted by that? I was so wounded from it, and I kept holding on to the wound. But I'll tell you what I've come to do now. And the way that I can tell this story without breaking apart, not breaking open, but breaking apart, is that I've changed the way the story's told. Because now if you think back about that story, perhaps my mother did something we've seen in movies, or, I just saw it in a movie the other day that Lars and the Real Girl had this scene where a person stood up in a meeting among the people in the church and said, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? And so my mother, in a sense, said, what would Jesus do? And Jesus would say, I love this child.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'm not actually Christian, but the story just lies all, twisted in there. So.
Well, let's quickly, because a lot of people watching this will be, I'm sure they're also spiritual based and Christian. So who is Jesus? The highest form that mankind represents the reflection of God, or they actually believe it's God. So if God would say, I love you,
right.
That's all that matters.
Yeah.
So.
Right. And, I've come to have this phrase that, God, it just gives me tingles, and I want to offer it to everybody else, that love is one energy with limitless expressions. So in our mental thoughts and our segregations, the way we divide everything up, we want to have divine love is this thing over here, or maybe it's this thing up here and it only happens under certain circumstances, and self-love, we find it through prayer or meditation or therapy or healers or moments when we're just present for the miracle that we are. And then loving another is one thing, and being loved is another thing, and we have them all separated. But they're not separate. Love is one energy. It's one energy. And when we can meld them together, all those ideas that divine love, self-love, loving, being loved, and spreading love around the world are all forms of creation. Now, any way that you can experience love can be applied to self-love. Anyway. So, I couldn't get so personal back then to say, I love myself, or I am a gift of love. I could not even come close to that. And for years when I could, I would burst into tears just saying, I am a gift of love.
I hear you, sister.
Yeah. And what I know now is that we are each a gift of love.
We are.
The trees that that grow outside this window in front of me are a gift of love. This technology that makes this possible is a gift of love. My new adopted kitties are gifts of love. This, glass of water, everything in life that we can experience or even beyond what we can imagine is a gift of love. And how could we not be?
Right. It's truly amazing. We need to, and this is what self-love is all about, accept ourselves and love ourselves for just the divine, beautiful, miraculous people, creatures, spiritual beings that we are.
Yeah.
Because we don't. Like when you said that you were, rejecting that about yourself, I did too. If I could just briefly share,
Please.
Because you've really moved me to. There was a time after 9/11 when my childhood finally caught up with me. I was an adult. I was close to 40. I'll say it on air because now I'm saying it on air. I'm going to be 50 when this airs, or I'll be celebrating my birthday during the time of this. And so, thank you. And so, I was actually went to a place in Arizona to just recover. They called it PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and from my childhood. And so every day, the director of this place would come in and say, do you realize that, in front of everybody, do you realize, Mia, you're a miracle? Most people would kill themselves. It was a place where sex addicts, drug addicts, alcoholics,
Yeah.
You know, we're all brothers and sisters. They all came for, you know, an amazing course that would change their life. And I was the only one there that suffered from depression from PTSD. So when she would come in and say, "You're a miracle," I'd say, "Well, we're all miracles," because that's how I thought of it. And then as the years went on, I realized I am a miracle, and I need to claim it, because that is my self-love. Not just pushing it aside, because when I started doing 25 years ago my self-love work, I remember looking in the mirror and saying, "I love you," and I was told to do that, and I bursted out crying and saying, "No, I hate you." So we get these dramatic expressions of what we truly think of ourselves, and unless we raise ourselves and our children to learn to love themselves, that everything is okay that we're doing, and appreciate every aspect, just like appreciating the glass of water for the beautiful, luscious taste that it fulfills in our system and how it nourishes our body. If we can do that for every aspect of us, we are expressing self-love. Wow. Okay. You have 4 aspects that you cover. So would you like to talk about those?
You know, I do. I received this message, and, you know, I suspect that a lot of the subscribers and viewers of this are likely people who meditate and, you know, are honing and furthering their own skills in clairvoyance or intuition or claircognizance. So this won't sound unfamiliar to you at all, except if you're a teacher, sometimes these messages come through and they're like, bam! Yeah. So this was one of those. I'm sitting in my office, in my yoga room, meditating and preparing for my yoga workout or process, and I kept hearing these words, and I thought, stop thinking. You know, I was in my meditation. And finally I realized that, I'm not thinking. This is a message, you know, coming through my channel. Some colored pencils that I keep there out, and I drew this out, this message that essentially said this: we as human beings can end our personal experiences and the ones that we perpetrate on others of all suffering. We can end all suffering. Like, I want to say it again. It sounds so Buddhist. We can end all suffering when we fully open to and stay lovingly present for the channels of divinity. You are divine. For vitality, this magnificent, we were just talking about like what a miracle it is to be a body, to live in a body. Your vitality is one of the channels that gives you expression to your divinity. Hallelujah. And the third is soul desire. So it's not that I want this, I want that. They advertise this, and now what do you know? I want it. But no, the soul desire, those things that bubble up in you, or things you fantasize about, or ideas that come up out of your meditations or into your artwork, or, you know, you're watching a movie and bam, some idea comes to you. Like those soul desires that kind of tickle you from the inside. And the message so clearly said, this is what you must facilitate. I misinterpreted it, I'll be honest. I felt like, I literally interpreted it. I must now go tell people, if you open your channel to divinity, vitality, and soul desire, baby, you got it, you know? But nobody knew what that meant.
Right.
And so I give, like, you know, a couple examples of, here's your divinity, here's your vitality. And so I wasn't exactly on a soapbox, but I was giving the information rather than facilitating and inviting the experience, because all of these are about the experience of us living lives that are grounded in joy, love, wisdom, connection. And then the fourth one, because you said there are 4, is that it came full circle back to me that my life's work has always been grounded in love. And so love had to be the 4th piece.
Right.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. And, there's so many things that we can do in any given moment that bring us more fully into divinity, vitality, soul desire, or love. And then there's so many things that we do unconsciously and unwittingly that keep blocking it. I think of each of them as channels of energy that almost like you could step into a flow like a tube. Oh, we have kitty love. You could step into a tube of energy that you're just in it.
Right.
So since we're focusing today on self-love, what I'd offer is that with one of the ways that we keep ourselves from it is we do what I just mentioned, is that I kept telling a story with an interpretation about how wounded I was around love, how essentially unlovable I was. And then I could find evidence everywhere because I'm really creative, right? Oh my God, I taught my ex-husband not to love me anymore. I was very good at this. Every time that something didn't work in a business endeavor or in some dream I was pursuing, it was because I was essentially unlovable. Like I just perpetuated the story.
Get the hell out of the story.
Right. So one of the things from an invitational standpoint is that I'd invite each of us, I do this myself, I'd invite you to join me in a practice of starting a journal that does two things. One is just start to get a record of how do I stop love? Or what are the stories I tell myself about the shadow side or the downsides of love? Like we have them everywhere, like love hurts. Don't risk loving unless you're willing to risk loss. What? That is just made up nonsense. That's not actually how love exists.
Right.
So if you can start to pay attention to what are those things I believe about love and challenge them. And so then to use the journaling for the next side of how else might I express this? How might I express this through the energy of love? And you'll find that those stories just start to take themselves apart and dissolve.
They do. It's beautiful the way that works, isn't it? You just get in there and you work that little baby and you see the clarity of the reverse. And that's how you can bring the clarity and love into your life.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love doing that because let's do one as an experiential. Let's talk it out. So bring one on because you've got you remember, or you probably can bring one up from one of your lists that...
One of my mini lists. So years ago, I sold a company. The woman who bought the company from me, we did the contract, she got all the parts, she got the database, she got the... I gave her the name of the company, like it was a great branded company, it was great. And she made her down payment, and then she never paid me any more money.
And you gave her everything because she gave you the down payment. Okay, I see.
And she was going to make payments, and she never made another payment after that. The story I told myself was, I was wrong. I'd made bad business decisions because I was wrong. I should never have given her all the stuff, but I really wanted out. I was done. It was okay. So I had all these mixed up stories in there, but the underlying story, the one that took me, 10 years to realize, was that I didn't believe I deserved to be paid, even though we'd agreed on it, because essentially I was not valuable. Which is another way to say,
which is
I wasn't worthy of love. I wasn't worthy of love, so I wasn't worthy of money.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So none of that makes any sense unless it's the story you tell yourself. So, so you can take anything that perpetually pains you, or some story that like it's a thorn in your side. It just keeps nagging at you. And keep asking, like I did about this one, why is this still a wound? Why am I still hurting? What's underneath it? What's underneath that? And when I finally realized that the thing that I was doing was I was telling the story that I wasn't worthy of love, then I could take it all apart and say, you know what, I had so many things to do with this. I didn't want to run the company anymore. I was done. I'd done all the creation. That's what turned me on. And then whatever happened for her, it happened for her. I didn't actually blame her or feel like she was doing anything bad or wrong to me because I thought I was unlovable. How could she possibly be doing any, right? So that might be a really extreme example. I'm going to give another one about, I was about 2 years, I think, into being single after having been divorced. And the guy that I was dating, sort of, that's a loose word for it, whatever we think, really creative and, a big step towards a dream for him. And he and I were driving in the car. I remember we were on the San Francisco Bay Bridge, and I was in the passenger seat of his vehicle, and he was saying, hey, I'd like some help with this thing that I'm trying to figure out here, and I'm not quite sure what the solution is. So I had a couple of ideas, and the second idea I gave him, he said, yeah, I don't think that'll work.
He took it.
And I said, I'm so glad I said it because it became that whoa, try and ignore this one. I said, oh, you just think it won't work because I said it. And I swear that if he could have stopped the car on the bridge, he would have. Because he stopped and looked, he kept driving, but he looked at me and he said, why would you say that? I so appreciate your creativity and your input and your insight and your ideas. That's why I'm asking you. I just think that this one won't be the solution for me this time. And it was like someone had popped all my bubbles, of defense. It was like, what?
Your bubble wrap went smooth.
And so I've returned to that one in my own uncovering and my own discoveries over and over again when I've noticed myself feeling that feeling that would say that. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
When I would have that echo come up in me that says, oh, they're just rejecting it because it's from me. They're rejecting my contribution because it's from me. And hence it's not worthy because I'm not worthy. Ooh.
Well, it's even more subtle is when you finally realize why you're not closing deals and why you're not bringing in more money, because the fear is so great that they won't see that you're valued for who you truly are.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, but you started to already break it down and to realize what the story behind the story was. It's truly amazing when we own our value and we own our worth. And even if you don't understand, viewers, what that is at first, just even say to yourself, I am worthy of love. I am worthy of, and it's my birthright as God's perfect reflection.
I'm source essence of all creation.
Yes.
That's it. Yeah.
To have these things. And then break it down from there. Why am I able to have this in my life? Not just that it's my divine birthright, but why?
Yeah. And
then break it down from there, because that will get rid of the story.
Yeah. I want to offer a completely different approach too, because this is helpful from the cognitive perspective. I'm getting words that express things, and I can see my thoughts that are underneath it, and the feelings that led to the thoughts, and blah blah blah. That's all great. But when we get right down to the basis of love and of life, everything is energy. Absolutely everything is energy. Some parts of energy move faster and they seem solid, and some move more fluidly, or some are so tiny we can't even imagine that they exist. Everything's energy.
Right.
Love is one energy with limitless expressions. So even if you can find a way to imagine, even if you can only imagine love, even if you think, I've never experienced love, I don't know what love is, if you can imagine love, if you think you've witnessed it somewhere, if you can think that perhaps, and I think this is from a Hafiz poem, I'm sorry if I'm wrong, that the sun never says to the earth, I shine on you every day, you owe me. No, it's love. The sun shining on the earth is love. So even if you could look at the sun and say, that's love, however you can imagine it, and then bathe in it. And maybe it's simple, maybe we'll all do this together, that you could imagine that right here in front of you is a pond of love. And then if you cup your hands into this pond of love, and you raise it up over your head, and you just let love, whatever you believe or imagine it might be, to pour onto you and into you. Through your face and through your brain and into your throat and over your shoulders and through your heart and all the way through your body. And even to add the words, I am worthy of love. Or, this is love, source essence of all creation, and I bathe in love. Now that might be really far out to imagine. Good. Because everything is energy. So if you can start to break open the constellations that we've so put in place individually and culturally and for the last many, many, many thousands of years, that keep us in the illusion that we are not love. Every way that you break those open a little bit,
right,
more love gets in, more love comes out.
Love it. Also, I was thinking, and this is something I do with my clients, is when you're bathing your body, appreciate everything as you're lusciously bathing your skin, because this is our temple that houses our soul. And
True.
And we need to love who we are that way too. And your water experiment, how it just reminded me of that, because they go almost like sisters hand in hand. Yeah. Because water is a beautiful expression of, we are mostly made up of water, and we need water, and we love water, and it's fluid, the fluidity. Yeah. How you explained that, I love that. That's really beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's nice. Would you like to talk about your free gift you're offering?
Sure. It goes hand in hand with what we were just talking about. There's a meditation that I've been doing for many years. At first, I did it unknowingly, and then once I realized it was what I was doing, I just nursed it, and so happy to share it with you. Wonderful. It's a meditation called The Breath of Love. And I've recorded it. It's available on MP3. It's one that is heart-opening, but way beyond just the heart chakra or the heart. It's opening to the essence of love. And it's so easy that once you get in the game of practicing it, you can do it while you're sitting in commute traffic. It's because you're not really like going up to the cosmos kind of meditation. It's so grounded and present in your body. And so we have that available as a meditation. And then I've also written it out because sometimes it's so helpful, for our, to get the wiring all to happen between our bodies and our brains, to then also read the words, so that you have that as available as a PDF as well. And then we're putting together something very new and special that's inspired from a part of my first book, Sacred Truths. That's a guided exercise on forgiveness. And I wanted to share that with you. So we're actually putting it together in time just for you, for this.
Thank you. That's really beautiful. So much of self-love is forgiveness, isn't it?
Yeah.